While I would prefer Alcantara at the trade deadline because of team control, I think we can get Cease without sacrificing as many assets. If he proves a good fit, we should have the edge in free agency. Agree or disagree, or better option? This is going to be, Joe. I know this is getting away from the question, which I'll throw to you in a second. This trade deadline, depending where a lot of these teams are, because of the lack of team control with some big arms, there could be some huge fish that are starting pitchers at this trade deadline available. And I'm really fascinated to see not only how the Mets play it, but how it's played across baseball, because not only will the returns be massive, but you're also talking about, Joe, these are two National League teams, which never makes business any easier.
It doesn't make it easier, but the Mets, when you talk about the Marlins and Sandy Alcantara, the Mets have made plenty of trades with Miami. So I think they're more than willing to do business with each other.
Huascar Brazoban, baby.
Huascar Brazoban. Yeah. And you go back to Delgado and LaDuca, and over the years, there's just been a lot. So I don't think Alcantara would be off limits. It would be a high price due to the team control. He's got a couple years left, I believe, and he's making around $11 million a year. So it's a really good deal for Alcantara. When you talk about Dylan Cease, and that name is brought up a lot, right? We talked about it towards the end of the offseason and into spring training. And I know Andy Martino has talked about him a little bit on Baseball Night in New York, and he wrote a mailbag for SNY.TV where he mentioned it. The Padres are good. Like what?
Very good. And they care about competing.
Yeah. Maybe I'm crazy, but I don't know why anyone thinks the Padres are in a rush to trade Dylan Cease. If they fall out of it, of course, he'll be a pending free agent and they'll do what they have to do. But that, to me, is a strong playoff caliber roster. And so I don't think Dylan Cease is particularly available. But in a world that he is, one part of this question that I wanted to highlight, where he said, if he proves a good fit, we, the Mets, should have an edge in free agency. I think if the Mets trade for Dylan Cease, they ain't signing him as a free agent. They're letting him walk at the end of the year. I don't think, because he is trending towards one of those long-term, big money contracts. Right. His age is soon to start with a 3. I don't think that's where David Stearns really is going to want to play. But I do think, just from an overall standpoint, that this deadline, if the Mets perform as they should in the first half, I think this is going to be the first deadline where David Stearns takes that step out to make a legitimate trade, and not just, nothing against Jesse Winker and Ryan Stanek and Brazoban. They were good additions at last year's deadline. I think this is the deadline where he steps out and makes a much bigger move.
Well, Alcantara is fascinating in that regard because, like you said, Joe, it's not a Cease situation. He is 29 years old. He'll turn 30 in September. He's under contract this year and the following year at an insanely good rate. And there's a team option in 2027, which obviously I think would be exercised. So, because the window the Mets are in right now, as much as we are amped for this year, we believe in the team this year, getting Soto at the age that they did gave them a nice little runway here, rather than, it felt different when they got Scherzer and Verlander, where it was like, hey, we're all in on this year. It's like, no, we feel like we can win for a long time. If you can go find a number one pitcher that remains in that 2.5-year window, that there's no cost that you kind of, look away to. Like, it's the reality is, if he's a number one pitcher and he's under team control for the next 2.5 years, there's no limit. Obviously, you're not going to trade 10 top prospects, but you're going to stay in the realm of the reality here, where that totally changes the outlook of your entire team going into a playoff series and how you can get through the course of a season. So that's a combo we're going to be talking about, Joe, I feel like, a lot on this show. Maybe not every show for the next couple months, but I would say June all the way through into July.
Yeah, as we move forward, let's get there first. Let's get to the point where, the Mets don't get ravaged by injury, knock on wood, or things go awry where we're not having this conversation. I think the roster's in a position where, as you said, when we flip the calendar, past Memorial Day into June, I think that's when we could get more serious about trade deadline